All right. Hey, thanks everyone for checking us out for another episode of Triple Play. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to support those that support us, like Brookes Bible College here in the Midwest. Don't forget to look into them if you're considering a degree or wanting to even just get deeper in your walk with the Lord. Give them a holler. Check them out. Their deal is they're awesome Bible college, and you can get a counseling degree there as well. But you'll come out of that college with very little debt. Most people who have ministries, average church right now, 75 to 100 people, can't do that with $100,000 worth of debt. And so you want to be able to get a good degree. You want to be in missions or do an independent ministry like we're going to talk about today. A place like Brookes will help you get going in that direction. So awesome stuff. And if you're a layperson, just want to get deeper, check them out. Brookes Bible College. That said,
who we got today?
Today we got Dave, and I'm going to probably butcher your last name. Kuntz, is that right?
That's it, you got it. Yes, sir.
All right, Dave Kuntz with R3. I've known Dave a little bit over the years because our church teamed up with you guys, and we were doing Saturdays where we go over, and then you were kind of on my hit list. I wanted to get you in here, and then we had a guest in here not so long ago from East St. Louis, and he said, we have to get this guy in here. So I was like, all right, apparently it's time. So Kempton said we did it. We need to get you in here. So Kempton, you're the reason why he's here today. Just joking.
Kempton's my guy. I shot him yesterday. So
yeah, well, awesome stuff he's doing here with City of Joy. Mm-hmm. And that said, I'm excited because I know a little bit about things. I know that you went to Moab, right? Or
Hannibal.
Okay, you went to Hannibal.
I did.
Okay, and then
close. You were close.
Well,
I'm just joking. They were our competitors.
They are competitors. Right. Baptist colleges. So Hannibal's actually a really cool college too. I really like them. So I just had a really close friend of mine. His son graduated there not too long ago. Was in her four years of wrestling there.
Okay.
So Andy McCollum's son. Mm-hmm. So
now same place.
He went to Hannibal LaGrange. Oh, wow. Yeah, he did 4 years of wrestling and placed pretty high in the NIAI
tournament.
Tournament, and now he's in the Special Forces. So you never know, right? But Hannibal. All right. Well, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you grew up, where you went to school, the St. Louis question, of course, how you came to know the Lord, and then walk us into, R3 Development. So,
yeah, well, thanks for hanging out. And, so I grew up in the area, St. Louis guy, grew up in North St. Louis County. I grew up in a Christian family. I was, can look back many generations of just believers, specifically on my mom's side, and so from as long as I can remember, the Lord had me around His word, His message, in the church, and just tremendous parents who love the Lord, and so my upbringing was really shaped by and large by Christianity, the faith, in Christian school. So I grew up in the Ferguson, Hazelwood area. Went to North County Christian School. Went to a elementary school called Faith Christian. Doesn't exist anymore. And then went on to high school at North County Christian School. Really the neat thing about that story is that God really used that school to just teach me how to know Him and love Him, and used just many of the teachers there. It's so funny because part of my background is growing up in a family that was just, my dad is a businessman, and he was a salesman, and early on got into real estate development and restaurant businesses. So from when I was really young, my parents bought into Subway restaurants, and so I grew up kind of around that setting, and was just really pushed in a lot of ways to think about where I want to go to college, what I want to do, how do I build a life for my family, how do I make sure that provided for, and how do I pursue certain degrees and different things like that, and make financial decisions that'll set me up for the long haul. And as I thought about those things, and as I went to school, and really had this desire to do computers, I want to do computers. I love technology. That's what I want to do with my life. And it was in high school that the Lord, it just got a hold of my heart. I made a profession of faith when I was really young, but I wasn't baptized until I was 15 years old, which is a significant moment in my life because I remember it. It was my decision. It was really a significant surrendering in my heart and my story to the Lord. And when I was in high school, it was actually February 12th of 2000 that the Lord, essentially the way I say it is he called me into full-time ministry. And so and the very next day, my now wife and I started dating, and we began this story and this journey of just what it looks like for us to be a couple and a family that we would allow God to leverage our story and our history and his goodness and grace in our lives to make a difference in the world.
I'm assuming based on how you told that story that you made that and then you met her the next day. It wasn't that you knew her and then you decided that day, or that was the first meet?
It wasn't the first meet.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it was, we knew each other, and I'll spare you the details of how all that went, but yeah, so it was just the next day, the decision, and,
okay.
Yeah, just how the Lord did it for sure. So,
cool.
So I grew up, two sisters, live in the area, and really close family. And when I went to school, so I went to Hannibal, as I was thinking about what it looks like for me to live out the kingdom and use the gifts that God's given me. I'm an athlete, so I played baseball, basketball, soccer, small Christian school, so you can basically get on any team and learn whatnot. But I played baseball, basketball, soccer. Went on to play baseball and basketball in college. My freshman year, I went to Chicago and played at a small Christian school, and then transferred to Hannibal for the last 3 years, where I played baseball, basketball there as well. And when I began my studies, my career in college, I really was like, okay, I want to do computers, and I want to serve the Lord. So I started a double major, theology and computer science.
How did you get into computers? Because I think that's pretty niche. Like, I liked electronics and stuff growing up, but I didn't ever tell myself I want to get into computers.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just something that came natural to me. It's something that I'm kind of a techie kind of guy, and something that I just enjoyed dabbling with, taking computers apart.
See, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I never got that desire.
Yeah. Right. It's like, let's see if we can get this thing back together.
That's funny. That's cool.
So yeah, I mean, it's just something that
some people like to drive a car, and other people like to build a car.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
I like to drive the car. I like to build.
And so I ended up partway through my career, or partway through college, I ended up dropping the computer major, and just realized that, man, I just felt like the Lord was leading me to not pursue that route, and pursue ministry in the sense of what you would traditionally call like full-time vocational ministry. And I'll share a little bit later about kind of how I view that now, and very much like how ministry is actually how we live every day as believers in every space and time and setting. It's not just the pastor in the church. So yeah, just from early on in high school, I don't know, the Lord just really built me and wired me and taught me through many leaders and mentors and teachers, that gave me a passion to just want to serve people. And so when I graduated, even all through high school and college, went on mission trips, even led mission trips, been to India multiple times, Mexico, local service projects, and just learned what it looked like to be a believer who lives out your faith in the everyday stuff of life and seeks to be a servant and a leader and to proclaim Jesus, or he's not proclaimed. And so yeah, when I finished college, so I graduated from Hannibal Grange with a theology degree, and was pursuing pastoral ministry and didn't necessarily know what that looked like and what that would entail. and actually spent the first several years out of college teaching at the high school that I graduated from. I taught middle and high school Bible and spiritual formation, and was a baseball and basketball coach for about 4 years, which was just like the funnest thing in the world to teach and coach. And I look back on those days often. Just fun times. And so, and then the Lord created an opportunity and just redirected some things, and gave me a heart and a passion to pastor. And he opened a door for me to go and help to start a church in the Ferguson, Florissant area. And so, with that, when you start a church, there's, you're not gonna get paid a lot. So you got to figure out some situations, ways to make ends meet. So I began working for my parents at their Subway restaurant, and I spent, it's about a 10-year window, give or take, where I was a bivocational pastor while also managing Subway restaurants. And so all these pieces are key, because when I get into R3 and the story of R3, it's pretty dynamic as far as like how God prepared me for all the different pieces of what R3 is and does. And so yeah, I was an employer, which for me, running Subway was mostly about how can I serve and love and minister to the employees that are next to me, that I hire. And so, I could tell lots of stories of times when I was just, it wasn't about getting sandwiches out the door. It was about how do I minister, and employees are coming in, they have needs, they need to be loved on. And so that was a neat thing for me to learn that setting. It was also hard because it's like at the end of the day, like it's your business, and you gotta make sandwiches, you gotta get out, you gotta get the customers out the door. And so creating like a ministry in that, was a fun little endeavor for me. And so, in that 10-year window, God just gave me a lot of opportunities, my wife and I, to minister in North County. So we lived in North County, really in the Hazelwood area for up until about 3.5, 4 years ago. And we just felt the Lord leading us and calling us to just give our lives to that place. And so that's where we got married. That's where we bought our first home. That's where we began to build a family. And even began our journey, which is a piece of the story of adoption. So we have 4 kids. We got married, and we'll celebrate 20 years this summer. And we have 4 kids, and our oldest is 16, and then 13. Those are biological kids, and then our adopted kids is 12 and 10, and they came into our home when they were 4.5 and 2.5. 4.5 months, I'm sorry, and 2.5.
Were they siblings?
Yeah, half siblings.
Wow.
Were you fostering?
We were.
Yeah, the guy before that was just here before, at the beginning of his story, starts out very similar, where they adopted two children. They were looking for actually like kids that were past diapers, because they'd already done that 4 times.
Okay.
And well,
that's what they want. Everybody wants the babies.
They need.
Yeah, well, they wanted the ones that were a little bit past that, and wanted them from like 2 to 6, and God wound up giving them twins, so 2 babies, and that had just been born, so they adopted as well. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a 10-year run of committing to our yes, because when our foster kids were in our home for about 4 months, their mom passed away. And so they became functional orphans. And so we just followed through with adoption, and so it's been a long, hard road of just navigating their own trauma, and they had some really rough things in the early part of their story, which again is such a unique piece of how, like, I work every day in a community and with youth who deal with massive levels of trauma, and that's a part of what we endure at home with our kids. And so it's such a huge need to be able to step into people's lives, and I've learned over the years of how it looks like to just sit with people in their pain, even kids, and not try to have all these, easy solutions, but to just be the love of Jesus in the space and the time. So we were able to do that in our home and teach even our biological kids, like, hey, how do we love now your brother and sister who create some challenges for us often, as they're trying to grow in understanding of life in the Lord and overcome their own trauma that was a result of the violations that they had no say in early on in their life. So yeah, we're deep into that journey, and it's been just a wild ride of depending upon the Lord, because we're just like, what? We can't do this. Like, and so it's like, yeah, what do we sign up for? But I just think that's a big part of just what it means to be a Christian, right? It's like,
what's the goal? Being steadfast.
Yeah.
Gotta go through a lot to be steadfast.
Yeah. And just, that's my wife and I, our desire is that the Lord would just use us, to make a difference in people's lives. And so my wife's a personal trainer.
She would hate me drinking this.
She would have something to say about that monster right there, for sure.
I don't drink them, only when I come here.
Okay.
Once every once in a while.
Yeah, well then that moderation, you'll be good. That's a good case. She'll figure out a way still to tell you that's not okay, but
all of a sudden I grabbed the water option.
Zero sugar.
That's what I got. That's what I got. So,
sorry I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Has she been doing it the whole time? Did she become a personal trainer early on, or is that something new to her?
Yeah, she's been doing it for around 20 years.
Wow.
So she started it pretty much out the gate.
Is she up in North County? Where's she doing it? Is it like just private, or does she do it through an organization?
So she does some of both. She has some private clientele, where she goes to different homes and things like that. And, she also has a degree in occupational therapy. So, that's been a huge, blessing for her to be able to help, especially older clients who are trying to overcome some different challenges. But she's also, her longest, position. She's, the corporate trainer essentially at Fred Weber, which is a local construction company. So she trains a lot of the team there, a lot of the executives, and she's been there for about 15 years.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah. So yeah, in about 2017, the Lord, began to create some opportunities for us to pursue some different things, and I thought I was on a path to go be the next pastor at a church. And in that season, the Lord, he kind of stopped me in my tracks, and it was really my wife who advocated for me, because I'm in this conversation with this church, and my wife was like, he's burnt out, he needs a break. And so they're like, yeah, absolutely, no problem. So we stepped away from that opportunity for a season, while I just rested and actually began to rehab a home with my dad. So I grew up with subways and real estate development. I grew up around construction. So that's kind of the other piece as I talk about R3 and what we're doing with affordable housing and construction. And so my dad and I began flipping this home in Hazelwood, and it was really an identity crisis for me. So much of my identity was wrapped up in I'm a pastor. Like, that's what I get to do. I was a Hazelwood police chaplain for 3 years. Like, we were so ingrained in mobilizing the church into the community. What does it mean to be the hands and feet of Jesus in the everyday stuff of life? And how do we live a life that demands a gospel explanation? And when given the opportunity, tell why. And so that's how I was trying to mobilize our church, was outside the four walls. And it was in that season when I got a call from one of the founding board members of R3 Development, where I'm at now. And they said, hey, we're looking for an executive director. Would you be interested? And, initially I was like, I don't know. And I believe I might have said, can we do it in North County? Anywhere but East St. Louis. And And as I began to pray and just look at those opportunities, they said, "Hey, if you're interested, will you submit a resume?"
So was R3 already around then?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so R3 was founded in 2015, which was just trying to remember. So R3 Development just turned 9 years old. City of Joy, when you had Pastor Kempton on some episodes back, they just turned 7. And so our beginnings and kind of how everything
Intertwines.
Intertwines. And so I'll circle back to that in a second. They said, "Hey, if you're interested in this position, will you submit a resume?" And I didn't have a resume. I was like, "Okay, let me put one together." So I began to piece together kind of the story that I just described. And before I submitted it, I went to my wife and I was like, "Babe, they're going to think I'm making all this up just because I want the job." Because it was like everything. Like I was a teacher, I was an instructor, I was a coach, I was a pastor, I was an employer. Like R3 Development, we focus our work around employment. So we're essentially discipling youth through employment, and we do it in the context of creating affordable housing and in the context of construction. So almost everything we do is construction related, and then we serve and love and minister in and through that. And so I submit a resume, and long story short, I move forward with that. And it was a massive step of faith of because I grew up, you don't go to East St. Louis. Now, the vast majority of people that probably hear that are like, well, duh, like absolutely.
Especially back then. I mean, it's become leaps and bounds even now compared to back then.
Yeah, so. It's tremendous. A lot of the things that God is doing, and
it was so bad it was in movies. It was, I mean,
it was.
Think of a movie. The scene is drive through East St. Louis.
Yeah, and for years prior, it's topped the charts as one of the most violent cities in America per capita. There was a time when it was number 1, and that's per capita. I mean, it's a small town compared to, the violence that's happening in, say, New York or Chicago or something of that nature. But, and so God says, no, like, this is where I want you to go and serve. And so I took on that position in February of 2018, and so just celebrated 6 years, and it's been an unbelievable experience of God's grace. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, but it's one of the most fulfilling and joy-filled things that I've had the privilege of being a part of. So, since we began, our mission has been to create life-changing opportunities for the youth of the community, and to point them to the love of Christ. And we do that through employment and construction. So we employ and train the youth of the city. So very tangibly, what we get to do is we get to live out the gospel in such tangible ways that our youth are literally rebuilding the city through housing projects, cleanup projects, various efforts around those things. And so, we have a special partnership with City of Joy, in that they own a bunch of homes now that we were a part of rehabbing, and so we get to help with some of the management of those homes, the upkeep of those homes, as well as partnering in other spaces to rehab properties. And so I think it's around 13 or 14 homes that we've rehabbed top to bottom in the community, with youth and volunteers. It's when I think about what we do at R3, to be able to tangibly express the love of Christ in a way that we are able to look at kids and tell them, hey, you matter. You have a story. You have gifts and talents. You have a purpose. And so many of our kids, they don't believe any of that.
Right.
The narrative and the stereotype is, you're from the community. You're a problem. It's a violent community, so everyone must be that way. And I'll be honest, it's been incredibly eye-opening and incredibly sad to be there every day and see boots on the ground, the amazing things that are happening, and then to hear the narratives outside the city about the city, which is why one of the most amazing programs that we have, that we've been faithful to continue since the very beginning, is our Second Saturday program, where we mobilize volunteers into the community the second Saturday of every month. And they partner with our youth to serve and rehab a home or another project in the community. And
yeah, I've seen like porches being fixed up and things cleaned up and painting jobs being done. And
how are projects assimilated? Do you have like a group of teens that come in and do the whole project, or do you have separate groups that come at different times, or how does that work as far as getting from start to finish with those groups?
Yeah, so the way that our kind of our youth, our program is structured is youth actually become an employee of R3. So they go through an interview type of process. They become an intern of the organization. We have really two staple kind of backbone programs. We have a work academy where it's really built around helping them understand the identity and the biblical narrative of work and what it looks like for them to see their life as a part of God's kingdom and God's redemptive work. And so it's all work focused. And then we have a careers academy that is, it's a newer program, and it's actually the most vulnerable population of youth in the city that need a different route to finish their education and begin a pathway towards a sustainable career. And so we have students who are in our facilities working on their high school diploma and earning their construction credentials. So we take a very long approach
that's amazing.
to youth. So, there's a lot of programs out there that are like, hey, come for 6 weeks and we'll teach you this. And then and it's like, no, we had a kid who was in our program for 5 years, who started as a freshman, stayed on until he became a senior. When he became a senior, he became a junior staff member. He was leading projects with our students. And now he's positioning to become a licensed, to become a master electrician.
oh wow,
Great.
And so, we think about like, why is all that matter, right? Like, why is, you think about like how the gospel interplays with these types of situations, right? Like, to be in workforce development and helping create jobs and job opportunities. There's a passage in Isaiah that says, I'm going to draw a blank because I'm on camera and it's on the spot, but
We'll get it pulled up if you butcher it.
it talks about what it looks like for us to, I'm just going to pull it out because I've quoted this thing 700 times.
yeah, go for it.
Where were we at in Isaiah? Do you know?
So Isaiah 61.
Oh, dang, you pulled it up way quicker than me.
Sorry, I actually had it up because I knew I wanted to reference it. But so this is what it says. It says, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to grant to those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garments of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. They shall build up the ancient ruins. They shall raise up the former devastations. They shall repair the ruined cities, the devastations of many generations." Our youth have taken on the identity of their zip code. And it's crazy. We have kids in our program who've been shot. We have kids in our program who are kids and they have babies. We have kids in our program who have experienced ungodly levels of trauma. And no one very few people care about them. They've been written off. They've been pushed aside. They've been stereotyped. And we had a girl just this morning before I came here, who was she just began crying. She's working on her high school diploma. She's got she's a young girl, and she has a baby, and she recently endured the loss of a couple family members, and she was just weeping. And our office manager was like literally holding her as she's crying and just loving her and ministering to her. And those type of opportunities to invest and pour hope into kids who need the space to breathe, need the space to experience a safe space where they're loved, they're not judged, they're not overlooked, that they can begin to believe that God cares deeply about them, that they have gifts and talents in the world to be able to make a difference, that their voice matters. And they don't believe that at all.
It sounds like you're making a good place for them to be known and loved.
Yeah.
That's good.
I was teaching, I get to teach them, do a class with them every Wednesday, and the conversation came up. One of the students said, "Is God real?" And it's such a significant question, because when I grew up in generational wealth. I grew up, my family took care of me. My mom loved me. She told me that every single day. She showed me that every single day. My dad did the same. Unbelievable servant, would give his life for his family. And I got to experience the love of God through my family, and God birthed faith in my heart through the love of my family. Our kids that we serve and love and minister to every day, that's not their experience. And it's easy, what I've found is to wonder, well, how is there a God, right? Is God real when I've watched my brother be murdered? Is God real when I don't know what I'm going to eat? I don't know if I'm going to live through the end of this day. And so it's opened up so many amazing doors for us to not just give a message of hope that's void of tangible actions to show. It's like, let's talk about that. Let me tell you how I know, and just begin to talk about my experience, and begin to talk about how I've seen God through His Word, and how God's persevered His story through Scripture over time. And I mean, those are the neat interactions that we get to have with our students.
If you're thinking about the parable of the good seed, the thing is the good soil, right? Mm-hmm. It's like I'm envisioning you creating a greenhouse to all the hard soil and all those hearts. You're just kind of tilling the land for them.
Yeah, that's good. It's one of our board members pointed out that, and this board member teaches in one of the schools and has for years. He said, our kids, they only think about surviving. So to be able to stop and reflect and dream and consider any type of belief about what's possible it doesn't happen, because so often it's like, how do I just live through today? And I think that's it's funny. One of the things that we have a hard time with is kids come to our program and they fall asleep. And I think initially we were like, wake them up. Our ministry is safe. Kids come into our building and they're fed, they're protected. It's a loving, relaxing environment. And when it's like a baby in the arms of his or her mom, right? It's like, gosh, I know I'm okay. And the longer students are around us, it's like, well, home, you can't sleep. Might not get to sleep at home. No, that's not every single kid's environment, but like the stress and the struggle and the level of trauma, is we're able to cultivate that soil where, like we can express the love of Christ in such tangible ways to be like, yeah, you're supposed to be working on your high school diploma right now, but it's probably okay for you to lay your head down because you're a 16-year-old mom who was up all night on your own trying to feed a baby, and you're supposed to be a kid. So we have the privilege of being fathers, a father figure to a lot of kids who don't have a dad. The ladies in our organization to be a mother figure, to love and care, and it's powerful. It's powerful.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it does.
No, it is.
So you guys focus mostly on East St. Louis?
Exclusively
East St. Louis. And then with these different academies, are they both doing the same type of rehab projects, or are they doing different projects? Do you have like one group that does this project and another group that does that project?
So it honestly ebbs and flows based upon what the need is, what the funding is, what the skill sets are.
How do you guys get your funding?
So very diverse. We're funded by a handful of churches. We're funded by a handful of local organizations, as well as we receive state funding. We also have an earned revenue strategy, so we're flipping homes to fund the organization. As well as we have a property management company within our organization that manages homes and receives funding from that.
Okay. I was just going to say, I think that was a good chance to let people know how they could help out.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to lead to is, so if people want to help out, whether it be through donations or even maybe coming over and doing a second Saturday, your website the best way to get a hold of for them to get a hold of you, or?
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll make sure we'll put that in the show notes for people, so that way they can reach out to R3 and if they're interested in helping out financially, or if they want to get boots on the ground and see what's going on and get involved, which I recommend everybody should try to, especially if you've never been down to an inner city area and you've always lived in your cozy life. It's eye-opening.
So that would be a second Saturday type thing. How do you get involved in that? Is that only for the local community, or can somebody from West County come out on a second Saturday?
Absolutely. It's both.
Okay.
So we have church partners all over the Metro East that are and business partners that are sending volunteers on a regular basis. So the second Saturday of every month, you can go to our website. You can see the details, and it links to a sign-up sheet. Stay tuned to our social media pages are really our most active pages for information. Are just R3 Development. Anybody from we mobilize. Mission teams. We create unique opportunities for mission teams. So we've had mission teams come from Florida to Kentucky to, they just come and they serve and minister for multiple days in the community.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
And so it's a unique, it's an awesome thing. And I would say this from the standpoint of like what it looks like to step into a space like East St. Louis. There's a lot of nervousness and a lot of like, I don't know. What I've found is that, you look at the life of Jesus and you look at the call on us to live sacrificially, to trust the Lord abundantly, and to step into the space of others with humility. Proximity brings empathy, or at least it should. Right. And to be able to experience what other story and journey is, and see for yourselves what is happening. So I tell people all the time, like, I'll give you a tour, like come, I go there every day, and it's God is at work, and it is not what people think. And there's just unbelievable work that is happening, and we're just privileged to be a small glimpse of hope among so many other ministries and churches and organizations that are seeking to rebuild the city. And so come see what God's doing.
That's awesome.
Work in massive ways.
Yeah. So obviously you weren't the founder of R3. Did they envision it just being in East St. Louis, or what's the vision of R3? Is it to get bigger?
So, we've actually received requests lots of times. Hey, will you come over to St. Louis? Hey, will you come? And who knows, way down the road, there might be a space and a time for that. Our focus is, our mission is to empower the youth of East St. Louis with job opportunities that equip them with the resources and skills necessary for success. And so, we focus on
East St. Louis. I just was curious if that was just something that you kind of got into, and that's where, or if that was the ultimate vision. So those that founded it, did they envision it being the way it is now, or was it envisioned to be different? Sometimes people envision things and God turns them and makes them something that they didn't quite envision.
Sure.
Somebody sends in a resume and changes the whole thing.
Exactly.
I've had lots of conversations with, it was co-founded, and one of the founders is one of my best friends to this day. And, he talks about how R3 is everything that they dreamed it would become. And so, I believe we're living out the mission that
you don't have to believe. The Bible says you're living out the mission, right? I mean, it's very clear. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can go talk to people about Jesus, but without providing something, the basic needs. If you see somebody starving in front of you, and you're like, you better pray now because you're going to meet Jesus. I mean, that doesn't. But if you give them, hey, I've got, the Bible says your tunic or whatever you may have, give it.
Show them love.
Show them love. Yeah, feed them.
Yeah.
Feed my people. Well, there are going to be many, many on the end days that say, Lord, Lord, I knew you, and he'll be like, well, when I asked for food, where were you? When I asked for clothes, where were you? And I obviously don't know exactly what you're working with. I did do some city ministry for a few years with a couple housing projects in St. Louis City, and I just know in my own personal experience that it changed an awful lot of who I am to even today. And my relationship with God became a different relationship because A, it took me out of my comfort zone, and B, and you're right. You go to those places, and I grew up in a loving home. We weren't rich. No major levels of inheritance that I got from either side. I mean, both families were pretty poor. My dad grew up very, very poor. My grandmother ran away from an Indian reservation at one point. So very, very poor from that perspective, but rich in love, they both loved the Lord. They both came to know the Lord and raised me up in that. But I look at, as you said, those in those areas, and you're absolutely right. There's this stigma that just hangs around that they just can't get out of, or don't see a way out of sometimes, until you just start loving them. And I really think it starts with loving. You just put your arms around them. You just said it earlier. Sometimes it's not giving them solutions, because honestly, sometimes there just isn't one, right?
Yeah.
When they come and tell you, I'm pregnant, I'm 14 or 15 years old, like we had Vondina in here, there's not a word you're going to say that's going to fix the problem at that moment. But what they want is to know that they're still loved, that there's hope, that they can make it through this.
Yeah. There's
other options besides aborting a child. And that if that's the decision, that you will, stand by and help to the best of your ability to see that through as a ministry. And so, I look at those, and I think that when the things you're doing, just giving them hope through job, right? Hope and purpose. Hope and seeing the community get better. I mean, because everybody in the community, as they start to see these houses and start to see R3 and what's going on, that they take notice of that, right? I mean, I'm imagining, just like City of Joy when we had Kempton in here, that people are taking notice of this change going on in their community, and hopefully that'll raise up more and more people who graduate from an R3 who become electricians, who, even if they move away, will still plug back into their communities. I mean, most people still go back, even if they move away, will go back to their where they grew up at some degree and invest in. And that's why colleges get great endowment funds, right? They want to college, or they're never going to go back, but they want to invest because they see the value of it. Well, they see the value of it, and hopefully, as that happens with R3, you guys will be able to continue to grow and transform East St. Louis. I mean, East St. Louis is such an interesting dynamic too, just in the fact that it's really gone through a transformation in the sense that it's become so desolate in many ways that a lot of the druggies and prominent things that it was known for have actually moved out to some degree. It's ripe for rebuilding and redeveloping and a new identity. Quite honestly, getting a new identity. I don't know a better place for a new identity than East St. Louis right now.
Absolutely.
So,
and it's happening. Like, who knows how long. And people ask me, like, hey, is your goal to revitalize the city? I'm like, no, my goal is to be faithful with every individual kid that God puts in front of us, and we'll see what he does long. It's up to him. But you talk about rebuilding, the 3 R's: restore integrity, respect dignity, revitalize community. There's a lot of slumlording that happens. People are taken advantage of. People are used to get money. And as part of the restore integrity piece is, how do we as an organization be a part of helping to restore some of the integrity between the tenant and the landlord? And so we're able to be a reputable landlord, and to love and care and provide services to those that live in the homes and the homes that we oversee. But another big one is so many families are taken advantage of by contractors. We get calls all the time. Hey, can R3 come do this? Can R3 give advice? Or, hey, I hired somebody and they took my money and ran. And so there's a huge need for that. We teach our kids, like, how do you be a person of integrity in how you work and how you live and what you do? It's critical. And that's part of the restoration process, right? Is to live out that value, in those that we have the privilege of serving.
That's awesome.
It's good stuff.
Well, thank you. Is there anything we haven't hit about R3 that people should know before we...
Gosh, I don't know.
You did a good job of...
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't have a whole lot of questions because he kind of answered a lot of them along the way. Yeah. Big things I wanted people to know were, how they could get involved and what the purpose and mission. I was going to ask you about the 3 R's, and you've already said that. So I figured R3 stood for something. So,
I think maybe one other thing that I'll mention is, and it's kind of been interwoven through what I've said, is, it's so easy to look at, to sit and live outside of communities in need. Like, North City, like East St. Louis, and, we could go across the country. And, I didn't choose where I live, any more than, when I was born. I didn't choose the family I was born. We all know this, right? I'm preaching to the choir, like, any more than the kids that we serve chose. I want to grow up in generational poverty, right? And the challenges that our inner cities face, there's so much spiritual oppression. There's so many spiritual strongholds. The spiritual warfare is intense. We have tangible evidence of that in the work that we do, and I could tell you lots of stories. But so the need to just pray and pray and pray for God's intervention, for God's work, and we often talk about, we don't know what we're saving these kids from on the day in and day out. And, so when we look at some of the news stories, and we hear of shootings, and we hear of all of the challenges that our country, our world is facing. Obviously we know, like, the hope of Christ and the need for the gospel to penetrate, and God to bring, from death to life. And what what does it look like for us to see that so much of the challenges and those that perpetuate violence in our cities are individuals who themselves experienced immense levels of trauma and were not loved, were not cared for, and so many of those who grow up in very, very challenging situations, very challenging homes, very challenging contexts. It's easy for us to just be standoffish with them, right? To fear them, or to be like, no, they're different. They're like, and we have the privilege. And I think like my encouragement to anyone that's listening to this is, what does it look like for us to, the scripture we were talking about earlier, like, to, whatever you do to the least of these, you do unto me, right? How do we love those who aren't like us, who maybe it's easy for us to sit back and be like, oh, they need Jesus, right? Well, guess what? Like, God's gifted you to actually be Jesus to them, like, right? And so, man, I think there's just an unbelievable opportunity for God's people and for the church to step into hard places and to hard spaces. And that doesn't just mean everyone needs to come to East St. Louis at all. It means that we need to get up out of our seats and get off our comfortable couches and go and step into something that's uncomfortable, that might be risky, that might be dangerous, and trust that God, one, that God's leading us, so it's led by the Lord, but two, that we would be people who would trust in, okay, I don't know how this is going to go, right? I live that every day. Like, I don't know what, we hear gunshots, our building's been hit, like there's bullet holes in it. Like, at the end of the day, the safest place that God's called us to is in obedience to Him. And there's a quote that I've heard countless times. It's a place where God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. And that's where we get to live every day. And for some, it might be playing Major League Baseball. And how do you intervene and intersect in that setting? For some, it's in the business world, and it's how do you live with integrity and honesty and working as a corporate executive. And for some, it's a calling into, challenging spaces to mentor and love and serve. And how do we leverage the gifts and talents to push back darkness in the world around us and really trust God with our life, because it's not ours. It's ultimately His to be lived through us. So,
well, and what that reminded me of when you said that was, it's a fun story, but when Albert Pujols went to Dominica and he was on his flight, he'd started his organization and he was flying it. But on this flight, he looked over at Todd, the founder, and said, "I wanted to do baseball park. They've been doing missions in this Bete, and they've been investing in it. This time they were bringing beds to give to those, because most people didn't have beds. So they're bringing mattresses to give to everybody." And but he looked at him and said, "I want to build a baseball. God just laid it on my heart. I want to build a baseball thing." And Todd's like, "Okay, I guess we're building a baseball." So they built a baseball diamond. Now, that was what God called them to do. They didn't understand what would happen. But when they built it, something started happening, because when they were at these Beatties, a lot of the men were gone. Why? Because they go work in the city. And they didn't come back. Why? Because where are they coming back to? A family, nagging wife, needs. So they often would stay in the city and blow the money and would send very little, if anything, back to these women who had their kids. Baseball park opens up. Day one, guess who's back? All these fathers. All these fathers started showing up because now they had a purpose, something to do with their kids, something to go enjoy, because there's not a lot of ballparks down in that area in Dominican. So all of a sudden, all these husbands and fathers and people who would go to the city to get jobs and wouldn't even really come back, now they're coming back to see their kids play baseball and engage and learn themselves and all that. And when you were saying it, kind of reminded me of that. Is like, sometimes we don't know all the ways God is going to do it, because Albert just knew that he wanted to build a ballpark.
Yeah.
And that was all. That's all he knew. God had just laid on his heart on his flight that when he went there, they were going to scout out room and look at building a ballpark there. And what he didn't realize is that might be the most important mission out of all the other things they did, providing food, but it brought dads back to families. And
Big multiplier.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, that story just resonated when you were saying that, because you're building things, but you don't know how it's going to resonate with each of the kids, with the community, with whatever God's got in store. All you know is simple obedience of go build it or go do this and be my hands and feet today.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And the tangible power of equipping and teaching another how to do something, whether it be baseball, whether it be, how to use tools or use a saw, or whether it be culinary or whether it be whatever, right? Like, when you put your arm around a kid, even proverbially, and show them a way to move forward, to think forward, to do something, like we're literally, we're paving a way for them.
That's scriptural. Train up a man and a boy in the way he should go, and he will not depart from it.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, thanks for being here today and then sharing with us about R3. And we'll have to get you back and hear more as God continues to do his work through R3. And
yeah, we'll get an update.
Yeah, maybe get both you and Kempton in here so we can enjoy a little camaraderie and have a good discussion of what God's doing in East St. Louis. But we really, really appreciate that your time today. So
thank you. Thanks for coming in.
And don't forget, folks, if you want to help out, you can go to the website. We'll have that on the links in the show notes. So whether you're listening or watching, you can just go down there, click on it, get over, and check it out. Yep. And that said, don't forget to support those that support us, like Brookes Bible College, but also like Andy McCall with Resource One. You can give them a call with any of your wealth strategy questions you might have. 636-458-1798. Chris with CS Design did our intro, outro, website, all sorts of stuff he's doing behind the scenes right now. 573-436-3717. And Jeff Earhart with State Farm Insurance, 314-821-5333, or Jeff, however you want to dial it. But you can give them a call if you have any insurance needs, and we appreciate their support. And when you support them, you're helping us out, so please do. That said, we'll catch you guys next episode, Lord willing.
Oh, wrong hand. You're safe.